So this would be for administration and for engineering. When I went out for bid, there was, on the models, I went out for bid and there was Sharp, Canon, and Ricoh. Ricoh is the one that we currently have as our provider. There was only $100 difference between the actual cost of the machine, but the ongoing price for basically the per-click price, which is the payment per image, in the long run, the Canon copier over a 5-year period was going to save the city approximately $1,600. So at this time, I'm recommending we go with the Canon copiers. And these copiers will pay for themselves with the savings that we're getting with the new agreement in under 2 years. So it's a really quick turnaround.
Did we ever look into leasing or into a program?
Yes, I did, but leasing is a lot more expensive.
Okay.
It's still cheaper for us to
Own 'em?
purchase the copiers, yes.
Do we have a maintenance agreement with this purchase, or?
Yes, and that's where that per-click price comes into play. And so when you look at the maintenance agreement, that's where the savings is over that period.
All right, thank you.
So,
Any other questions or comments? Okay, we'll need a motion to send this on to council.
Make a motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Solentrop, seconded by Scornia to send this item on to council. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, you sent it on. Thank you. Did I miss somebody?
Antennas and radio wireless system bids.
okay, this item, I'm going to rely on Greg for any details, but basically, this is the continuing of our upgrading of our wireless infrastructure. This is to purchase various antennas and radios and access points, and this will upgrade the major links across town to gigabit capacity and will bring the H-Tower online. It's also needed to provide the high-speed internet access to the downtown areas on the west side of town and the west side of town, and also all city-owned buildings and properties. Is that good? Okay. Anything else, you'll have to ask Greg about.
Greg, are these the towers that you've been working with the last few months? Are these the towers that you've been working with for the last few months?
Yes.
The equipment that goes on those towers, yeah. This is the bulk of the.
So this is like the H tower that we've got down here by the depot. Mm-hmm. This will go ahead and provide the equipment for that.
Well, and it's also going to establish when one connection goes down, then the other one's right there to back it up, so we don't lose.
Right, this will link up,
Connectivity.
this will link up all the water towers with, right now, they're linked with speeds of 100 megabits. We need at least we need a gig to be able to deliver the speeds that we need to the firehouses on the west side of town and the city buildings on the west side of town, and then also the riverfront, the speeds that we're getting at the riverfront. So that's all the equipment for the H tower and to go to Enduro Water Tower from Crestview.
So all the citizens of Washington can get off the H towers now?
Right now, nothing's on the H tower. This is to put a bulk of the equipment on the H tower. But in here as well is to light up Enduro Water Tower.
Will the public have access to the Wi-Fi for downtown?
They will if we want them to, yes.
Okay.
In designated areas.
Right.
Where we want it and when we want it, yes, that's what this is.
There'll be passwords for that, I guess.
We've already talked about this afternoon. We had a meeting with the Legion with regards to fees and et cetera, but the question was raised about access down there. We removed an AT&T account, I think, that we had down there some months back, but they're going to need something for their facility down there. I've already texted Greg about that this afternoon or whatever, but the fairgrounds and the riverfront were all areas that we were looking at to go ahead and have access for the general public right off the bat.
Right. This won't be everywhere throughout the city. This will be in designated areas at designated times, allowing whatever kind of access we want.
Okay, cool. Exciting.
Any other questions, comments?
Make a motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Holtmeyer, seconded by Pettit, to send this item on to council. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, you sent it on. Thank you.
Police server bids.
Okay, the third item is for police server. The police department needs basically more storage capacity for the video cameras, for the mobile data units, and the body cameras. And the one we have is, I guess, basically full.
The one we
Or-
have is a piece of what we've been using since the data breach remediation. So we only allocated as much as we could during that time, and they need a lot more storage than what we have available.
And this will allow that. So I went out for bids, and in this case, Wash PC was the lowest and best bid. We do have $10,000 budgeted, and their bid came in at $9,580. So I am recommending that we go with Wash PC for this purchase.
How long is the all that video footage stored?
Some of it needs to be stored for years. I believe the requirement is, I don't know the requirement, but I know we haven't been able to delete anything since, so.
So an active case, until it's adjudicated in court, has to be maintained until everything's done in court. Then we get an order for disposal. Some cases you keep all the time, murder cases, things like that. You'll just keep those for 30 years or whatever. Other minor cases are just basic video that records. That's usually about a 30-day turnaround. Sometimes 60 if we flag it for something. But anything that has a report is kept. If it goes to court, it has to be disposed of. If it's not something that we're currently investigating or we're through with or there's nothing else to do it, then we'll get rid of it. So you have a building up of video as time goes.
Takes lots of space.
This will be exclusive for the police department only, right?
Yes.
I mean, there won't be anything else stored on it. So,
Any questions? Any more questions?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, we have a motion by Patke, seconded by Holtmeyer, to send this item on to council. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? By your vote, you approve the item. Thank you.
Communications, emergency antenna purchase.
Good evening. In your packet, you have a letter for an emergency purchase that had to be made for an antenna site that kind of ties into Greg as well. During the month of January, our radio system experienced a couple of failures. The first failure occurred over the big snow event weekend, and we actually lost all of our transmitter sites. And I got a hold of Greg. Greg had to come up, and he had to replace radios on the Crestview site and the City Hall site, and it brought everything back up. And then I guess it was last week, Monday, the Thursday before that, I actually had the date there, January the 25th, we lost one of our transmitter sites out at Clay Street. Clay Street is where all of our main transmitters are located, and it went down, but it kept up the other two sites. Crestview is the main hub of the antenna system, so one of the things that Greg is doing with all this stuff is he's trying to put in a redundant system so that if one site goes down, if Crestview were to go down, it will no longer take out the Clay Street or the local site. We also have a site at our place, well, City Hall. So that happened on a Thursday morning about 4 o'clock in the morning, and it came back up before Greg and them could investigate into it, so we felt that it was probably another issue with the antenna because it was really cold. We thought that it was an issue with the radio site, so we felt that the best thing we could do is replace the antenna out at Clay Street, because obviously our radio's going down is not an option. So we ordered the equipment with the approval of admin, and then that Monday night, lo and behold, we had another failure, and it happened to be same site, and we got the equipment in that Monday, and Greg and his team, they had already installed the equipment. They decided rather than replacing everything, they just duplicated the stuff, ran all new wires, so that eliminated if there was any kind of an issue. He still had staff in town, he was able to get to the Crestview site, and he actually located that a port on a switch had actually failed, and that's more than likely what caused the Clay Street location to go down. So they replaced the switch. We've had no issues since then. The failures, we simply switch over to our backup radio system. So we do have a backup radio system at our location. So we simply switch over to that so that we don't lose communication. The first failure did identify some things that we needed to improve within the programming of our new radio system that after 20 years we had never thought about doing, like standby Knox boxes. They had never been on the old radio system as standby frequencies, but we needed to set off a Knox box and couldn't. We now can. So we've made a lot of improvements with that radio system, as well as what Greg is working on for the city. So it'll tie in to what he is doing and what we're all trying to accomplish with the city. I think I explained that okay.
That's good.
Okay.
How old
So-
was the antenna that was replaced?
We did not replace it.
Oh.
So the antenna, we are actually going to utilize both of them, and that's what's going to help keep that link up. So right now, Crestview is what goes to Local and Clay Street. Well, if Crestview goes down, then you lose everything. So he's actually going to put that up there, and it's going to actually circle back so that, you know, if one loop goes down, you do not lose everything. So both units will remain there, and one of them will remain as a backup. So if you had that, it would just simply pick up for the other link.
Yes.
So do you not think that the antenna failed now and it was a switch instead? Is that what
So-
you're,
It's
So
hard
the-
to tell.
got it?
The original failure happened in the middle of the snowpocalypse, so we replaced the equipment in a hurry because that's what we had determined it was at the time. The second failure, we were able to troubleshoot because it was still in failure while we were on site.
The second time it
The
failed.
second time. That's when we determined that 100%, the second failure was caused by the switch that was installed at the time of the new radios going on.
Yeah.
That's when we put in the new switch.
So what, the other thing that we're going to do is he left that switch in place as a warm backup. So he put in a new switch, and we're going to replace the switch. Where else are we replacing the switch? We're going to replace another switch at Clay Street. We're going to leave that also as a backup, so that if you were to have that, all you have to do is unplug and re-plug in, so that you don't have the downtime that we had. I think the first time our downtime on that Saturday was, I don't know, maybe 4 hours. But there was no real radio traffic because everybody was staying home with the snow. So, and what we did at that time is we used our backup radio system. The backup police transmitter, it's also located at Crestview. So we did lose that. So one of the sergeants, he actually became our radio guy, and we were able to communicate, you know, if anybody was out on the road, and that's what we had to do the second time as well. But since then, there were some additions that we did with the new console system, in which we placed a radio system called a consolette. So there's 3 consolettes that are in place in the equipment room, and they can be programmed with, I think it's more than 150 channels. So Motorola came out, we programmed those radios to include all of our main frequencies, as well as our fair frequencies, our downtown frequencies. So now if I were to have that same failure today, I would simply pull up my consolette, I would pull up the police main frequency, and I've lost nothing. So those are all hardwired in that building. So other than something chewing through the wires, we're not relying on AT&T or Charter or anything else like that. They're hardwired. Any other questions?
Any other questions?
Sounds good.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we'll need a motion to send this
Make
on.
a motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Holtmeyer, seconded by Pettit, to send this on to council. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, you approved sending that on. Thank you.
Economic Development, Locust Street redevelopment.
Sal?
Good evening. I just wanted to brief all of you on giving an update on where we are at with the Locust Street redevelopment. This has been a couple years in the making. If you remember, a portion of the old Frykes plant there, you can see in your packet, there's an aerial It's that parcel to the south, and then also the old Frykes Trailer Park that was bought a couple years back in order to redevelop this area and get it back on the tax rolls for some workforce housing, some more affordable housing. The reason this has been stalled is that we decided, as you all know, to purchase that additional property to the south, which is still subject to close March 1st. But we wanted to have this RFQ ready to go as soon as we close to maybe get some proposals in, some bids in, and ideally get this construction going late spring, summer, if everything goes to plan. So the plan here now today is to transfer, after we close and demo the remaining buildings, just that one house and a shed, to transfer both properties, well, I guess all three properties, there's the parcel on the west side of Locust and then the two on the east, over to 353 Redevelopment Corporation, because they have a little bit more liberty when it comes to reviewing proposals. As you all know, when the city sells property, we just have to sell it to the highest bidder. When 353, their whole point of the Chapter 353 statute is that they are able to redevelop an area, review proposals, and determine what's best for the community rather than just take the highest bidder. So this is our draft of that RFQ that we would send out with the property. It kind of gives an overview of our goal of the area. If you remember, we determined that we wanted this property, given the nature of the surrounding residences, to a little bit higher density, a little bit, hopefully more affordable housing. We've been fortunate in the past few years, our increased in residential growth, but it frankly has not been the range, the price range that is facilitating first-time home buyers and young professionals who are looking to have owner-occupied. So I think we've made good steps in our changes to our multifamily residential, but this, if you look in here, is specifically for owner-occupied. So this would allow for workforce housing, and there is a cap in here. 75% of it would be required to be $180,000 or less, and the remaining 25% will be below $250,000. These are parameters that are not set in stone. As you can see, these are guidance, a list of the following guidance is provided to assist the development team. So those are all items that we would encourage, and they would get more points if they could show they were able to make that. And the last thing I just want to point out is, I know we still are encouraging, we would require in the proposal for Wainwright Street to be continued through, and ideally some type of cul-de-sac would be on this property, so you could have Wainwright go through Locust Street and then a turnaround, an approved fire turnaround. I know originally we thought we would encourage the existing zoning, which is that R1B, single-family residential, 6,000 square foot lots. We think you may be able to get 20 lots on there, which we would still accept if the developer thinks they can meet the workforce housing parameters. But just because of the cost of the price per square foot in construction is up right now, they may not be able to yield with only 20 homes the return on investment that would make it worth it for anyone to even submit a bid. So we are encouraging and are allowing, I would say entertaining the idea of someone wants to come in with a planned development, something a little bit higher density, shared walls, maybe some townhomes with slab-on-grade garages and 2 stories up with a shared wall. That's just an idea that is kind of shown out in here to give some flexibility for a development team who wants to submit. So, and I don't need any action tonight. I just wanted to brief you before it closes because, again, the idea would be to transfer this property over to 353 in March.
Sal, what did you see the price?
Right now, we have it at $180,000 for 75% of them, and then the remaining 25% of the units could be $250,000. Gives them a little flexibility where they can try and make a little bit higher profit on the remaining lots. And I found that was I actually found a couple different federal RFQs that use that threshold. Like if you're using HUD assistance in an urban area, a lot of times they do 75% lower income, 25% medium to higher income, just to give it a mix in the area. And I think that would be a good idea to kind of make sure it's not all one threshold. Hopefully it'll entice a little bit, some more developers. So
We feel you're going to have more than 20 units down there to entice a developer to go ahead and do that.
we think if you, and I don't know this for sure, but if we stick with single family and just say you got to build traditional homes, you would have to give the property away to make it worth it.
And we want to go ahead and encourage them to.
Right. So we don't have a price on here. It's just encouraging a private-public partnership, and so that would be determined depending on their bid. Again, this is just an RFQ, it's a request for qualifications, it's not full-on accepting a development. This, ideally, it says in here, they would, if multiple people submit and we're lucky, we'd bring them in for interviews, we would discuss their vision with it and see if it fits, so.
We just wanted to give you an update tonight to let you know this is how we're moving forward with the property. This was kind of what the goal was with this, as we explained it to you, I think almost, like Sal said, 2 years ago. I would say at least a year is the last time we probably brought something before you, maybe a little bit less time than that. But
Yeah, it's
still.
been on the, we've been talking about it as soon as we started the negotiations on that last piece of property, so.
Right.
And hopefully we could take this model, and if more property becomes available, you know, we've talked about, we've pointed out other properties in town that this could work. You know, if, say, the Sportland area gets cleaned up, you know, we would use a similar RFQ for this, between 6th and 7th, an area down on 10th Street. So hopefully this can become a model for future development.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, thank you, Sal.
Firearm code amendment?
Yeah, and the other item I just want to discuss, again, this will have to go to P&Z, but since it is a more specific code amendment, I wanted to bring it up here first, and I did talk about it with Piontech. We received, about a month ago, a request from an existing business owner to expand their business and put an indoor firing range inside. And we didn't have a specific section in our code that would allow that, so I called Mark Piontech and just asked, you know, at what point, you know, does it need a special use permit, does it need a rezoning? And we realized back in, I believe, 2012, the city adopted an ordinance prohibiting, well, I guess we already prohibited discharge of firearms. So we adopted an ordinance in 2012 allowing the discharge of firearms only on properties that are 3 acres or more, and they are more than 450 feet away from a structure. And that leaves it at that. It's pretty black and white. And so that completely prohibits any firearm, even any discharge of firearm, even if it's indoor in an approved firing range. And so what I would propose is that, since that really wasn't the intent, I think when we adopted that, that was during the annexation, we wanted to be able to annex large pieces of property and allow them to continue to hunt. That was the goal with that ordinance. And so I would propose a code amendment to that specific ordinance, exempting indoor firing ranges under the condition they still get a special use permit. So it'd still go to public hearing. We still get to review it to make sure they have the appropriate building code that would be necessary, as well as lot layout, parking, and all of that, but still make it a viable business option in town. You know, I don't think it'd be something that it's straight up prohibited in the city limits, so.
Still have to be 3 acres plus.
No, we would remove that.
If it was indoor.
Indoor.
Yeah.
So it's
You'd have to
indoor.
meet those other requirements, but.
Because you're not gonna find a lot of existing commercial land, someone's wanted to do this 3 acres and above.
Would there be a mechanism for them to do it without doing a code amendment if they went through Board of Appeals?
No, because it is a specific ordinance that actually is not tied to the building code nor the zoning code. That is its own ordinance about firearms. And so it would actually be 2 code amendments, one to the zoning code, adding it to our zoning matrix of a list of approved special uses, and then also amending that original ordinance to exempt it on properties that get a special use permit. So, yeah, so it will have to go back. If it was just the latter, it would just go to council. But since we have to add it to a special use, it does have to go to planning and zoning.
Is there somebody still interested in doing this?
Yeah, and they said they weren't in a hurry, so they were fine with waiting for the code amendment, but, yeah, there's someone who is looking to add on, so.
Any comments or questions?
All right, and then the last thing I just want to bring up is we are hosting the Independence Missouri's Leadership Exchange this week. I think you should have all gotten an email. It's about 40 to 50 community leaders from Independence. They chose Washington as their 2019 exchange. Last year they were in Bentonville, so I thought that was an exciting thing that they reached out to us. They normally go to larger communities, but they had some members of their community who had been here and were impressed with what we did. And so the whole idea, it's a day-and-a-half conference where we meet with their counterparts, not only with city employees, but the school district, their hospital, their service organizations, and you just exchange ideas. We're going to give them a couple tours, show them how we've completed some projects, how some things were funded, any creative economic development programs we did, and everyone's invited to the work and lunch on Thursday. which I know is in the middle of the day. It's 11:30 to 2:30. There's a number of presentations that will be given, city staff will be given, or the chamber. And then in the evening at 5:30, there's a reception at John G's. So informal, they're not going to have any ceremony. They just wanted somewhere big enough where everyone could go grab a table, grab a drink, and network. So,
Any questions?
all right, thank you.
Reservation needed for that day, if we're available to be here? You don't need a reservation?
No.
for Working lunch?
No.
If you're available? Okay.
Yep. So we can always, yeah, if you can let us know the morning of, because we'll add lunch. We're getting Joe's Bakery, so.
Cold cut.
But we ordered 12 right now, just as 12 additional lunches, so,
It's a working lunch, Steve.
yeah. So, all right, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Sal.
Administration? Community and Economic Development Director Agreement?
So you have, there's two items, actually, there's been three items that we've been working with the Chamber of Commerce for over the last year, and we're finally ready to bring at least two of them to you. I'm hoping that the tourism one will be at next month, and we can, but the ones that are ready to bring to you, the first one is the Community and Economic Development Director Agreement. Since the creation of that position back in, it looks like 1986, there was an agreement at the time, years ago, that the city would go ahead and fund 50% of the position. The other two, 25% came from the chamber, and another 25% came from the Washington Civic Industrial Corporation. Sometime between 86, 87, on up to 99, it just became the Civic Industrial Corporation bowed out of providing a salary for that, probably due to the fact they didn't have a revenue source that they could go ahead and steadily provide that from. And so the city took on 75% of that, and it was 25% then came from the Chamber of Commerce. That has typically been about a $14,000 a year, I think, is how much we get from them on that. And so what we did was we discussed to increase that, because it's been some time since the chamber we had talked to them about increasing that amount. And what was discussed and what was suggested was, if you look on the first page on Article 2, number 1, its chamber will pay 30% of the base salary of the director as determined by the city from time to time. The chamber shall make monthly payments, blah, blah, blah. It's based on that base salary. So whatever that base salary is of that position, that's what they pay. Both of these agreements are 3-year terms, so that we'll go back and revisit them, so that either party can go ahead and take a look at that after 3 years. We felt that that was a suitable time frame. But for this one, this would increase that. I think it goes up to 17,000, so it'd go from 14,000 to currently they would be paying, or with this, as we approve this, eventually it'll go up to 17,000, based on the pay of our Community and Economic Development Director. So that's the first agreement, unless you have any questions. I do not need to move this on to council. Well, I do, actually. We'll take a motion to go ahead, because we'll probably provide this to you at the second meeting in February. I did not want to put it on tonight's agenda in case you had questions, because we've taken a year to get it to you. I didn't think another 2 weeks was going to hurt anything. Anybody have any questions?
Make a motion, send it.
Second. Okay, we have a motion by Solentrub, seconded by Pettit, to send this item on to council. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, you sent it on. Thank you.
So the next item is for the Fairgrounds Operating Agreement. And we have not really had an agreement in place, other than when you go back and you track minutes from previous discussions with the council. I think the last one, it was at 1987 was the last time it was really discussed in some type of formal process. And at that time, it was, let's see, 14? Is it also 14,000? Or is it 15? 15? 15? 15, thank you. So that has been what we've been operating under, also with the idea that the chamber pays for police services out of their own pocket. The city provides support services, but this would also put a time frame as to when those fairgrounds would be available strictly for the chamber to go ahead and operate. As you can see, though, in Article 2 on the first page of the agreement, the rental fee, that's the biggest item in the agreement, It basically states it's $20,000 that they will go ahead and pay. They will also pay in addition to the $20,000, 10% of the net profit that the chamber earns from each fair year that's in excess of $200,000. So it goes up if they net profit anything over $200,000, we get 10% more based on that profit over $200,000. So that was something that we negotiated with them. We also, there is some electric service that's going to be transferred over to the city that had not been transferred. It had been in the chamber's name for quite some time. There are a couple of meters that they still want to keep in their name, just because it'll cost more for us to go ahead and transfer it at this time. So we agreed to that. I'm trying to give you all the highlights. The only other thing that came up today that, as we were discussing, was the fact that also it says in that paragraph on the rental fee that it would be, they'd have exclusive access from July 1st through August 31st. The Legion has their fireworks, obviously on 4th of July of every year, so we want to go, we'll probably move that date back to something like July the 5th or July the 6th, something like that. But they don't really start to move or need anything until that time frame anyway. But that was just an oversight, but we brought that up with staff this morning at our department head meeting, and so that was brought up.
Any questions, comments?
Make motion, send on to council.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Holtmeyer, seconded by Solentrup to send this item on to council. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? By your vote, you sent it on. Thank you.
Any other department heads?
Race. Whoever wants to get up here first.
And they're off.
And they're off.
I just have a couple small comments I wanted to make for this month's building report. We've got, we've only had one single-family residence, a couple of residential alterations, 4 commercial alterations, 2 industrial alterations, and 140 inspections for the month. So, are there any questions?
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Kevin?
Good evening, everybody. I just want to let you know of a couple things we're working on besides Well 9 and Melton, a couple other things. We're looking at installing a bigger pump down at Walnut Street lift station. When I say a bigger pump, we're calling it a storm pump. It's going to be capable of pumping 25 to 2,800 gallons a minute from the lift station down to the treatment plant. That's to alleviate some of the surcharge. Well, it will alleviate the surcharge that we get on the Front Street sewer system when we have heavy rains. We have infiltration. We know we do. We have to move that from point A to point B. This pump will do that. So that's what we're moving on that. The other thing is we're looking at, as most of you know, maybe all of you know, we have our combination Vector truck. It's a 2006. We bought it used in 2009. And it's finally gotten to its last leg. So we're going to move it up from, working with Mary, we're going to move it up from next year's budget. I actually had it budgeted for next year. Hopefully we can make it. What we're finding is the parts that are starting to go out on it are irreplaceable. It's become obsolete. So we need to purchase a new one. So we're working on that. Of course, both of them have to be approved by the Board of Public Works, so I just want to let you guys know this evening that there's a good chance that at least one, maybe not both of them, will be coming back to council this month or early next month. So we're shooting for this month. Everything has to be ordered. We're looking at a July date for the truck, even just to have the truck itself. It'll be on a Freightliner frame, and the July date for delivery of those is what that is. So we're looking out, so we got to get in. If we're going to build this, we got to get into the queue to get it going. So it's 2 big things. Granted, they're big things, but we need them. The Vector truck we use all the time. We've used it for, well, we don't only use it for sewer anymore. We use it for potholing. We even used it for emergency services 2 weeks ago. So it's something that the city needs. So,
Kevin, was that the one you demoed today? That's the type you're getting?
Yes, yes. We're looking at getting a bigger one. Right now we have a 6-yard container on the back of it. What we found is it was a great truck when we bought it in 2009. We got a heck of a deal on it. But as we've used it more and more, we've realized we need a bigger tank, so we're going to go to a 12-yard, which requires a tandem truck to carry that. What we find is we're making more trips to the landfill or more trips to the treatment plant or more trips to a dump site, and it's taking more man hours and more time, so we're upsizing the truck, so.
Would be a bigger motor on it too, I guess.
Bigger motor, yes, bigger motor. So we're working on, we're demoing trucks right now. This was our second demo today. We're working on getting one more scheduled for next week. And then we'll put all of them together and staff will decide which one we feel is the best for the employees, the easiest to work with, the easiest to maintain, the cheapest to maintain. Freightliners are one of the top line trucks that's out there right now. So that's why we're going with that. So it's Well 9, we're still working on it. We kind of got caught in the weather on this one. We need to dig the footings, and we know that if we dig the footings and it rains, we've got to go back and do something else, so we're kind of playing the dodging game on that, but we're still working on it. I've got a couple questions on if well 9 could be moved a little bit, if the building could be shifted. So let everybody know it cannot be shifted because of where the wellhead sits and the discharge pipe is. There has to be a certain amount of distance between a wellhead and the discharge to allow us to disinfect and put our chlorine in. So the building can't be moved. However, we are squaring it up with the back of the curb, which it wasn't before. It was sitting crooked, which did, I think, affect a little bit of line of sight, but I think with us squaring it up, it'll help on that, so.
Any questions of Kevin? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mark, did you have something?
Good evening, Council. Just a couple of things. EPA Tier 2 reports for the city-owned fueling station, which is at Public Works and the airport. Those have been completed, submitted. Those have to be done on an annual basis. We had a couple of department head meetings to discuss preparation for the snow events. Warming centers, just confirmed everything was okay for the warming centers during the recent cold, so between the hospital and the library, all was well. And myself and Lisa put together, with severe storm season coming up, we put together a weather warning and code red and preparedness message to be put into the utility bills this month. And that's all I have.
Any word on the Sporlin site yet?
We are still waiting for the spring session, and I'm sure that the shutdown affected that to some degree, because on the day I tried to call EPA, obviously no one was answering the phone. So I'm sure that affected that a little bit, but I'm told that is done sometime in the spring, March or April. So I guess we're at that point or a little bit later until we hear if we get put on the national priorities list.
Okay. Anything else? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Clara, did you have something?
I've been working on a summary of some things in an article that'll be in the paper soon, but I thought I would share some highlights from last fiscal year. We had over 139,000 items checked out through our library, 128,000 visitors. 9,000 people came to our programs, and we had 360 programs, so almost one program per day for the whole year.
Wow.
So that's pretty busy. Our circulation goes up and down, but what we found out is e-circulation right now for Scenic, which we share, our patrons check out the ebooks from Scenic, and we don't get those numbers, but their e-circ has gone up 9.7%, and so that's causing a little bit of a dip even in their circulation. So I'm not worried. I think we stay pretty busy, and we're back up this month. Last month we were a little bit low compared to the year before, but we're above what we were last January. So I feel like we're staying busy and on top of things. So,
okay. Very good. Any questions of Claire? Okay, thank you. Tim, did you have something, or? Okay.
We're good.
I think that's it. Shauna, did you have anything? No? Chief? Okay. Everybody's shy tonight. So do we want to do council comments now?
Yes.
Let's do that.
Council comments?
Any comments?
We're good.
Okay, so we'll adjourn, call for.
Motion to adjourn. Second.
Motion by Patke, second by Hopmeyer to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? For your vote, we're adjourned. So we'll be back in